Hello, everyone. This is Phil Arlano, the youth minister out at Faith Assembly in Grandy Tour. Today, I want to talk to you about tithing. So, this is a video for the parents. We are going to be encouraging students at youth group to give and teaching on giving. So, this video is for you with a little bit more information and certainly heartfelt information than I want to communicate over text message. I hope you enjoy. First, I want to start out with a little anecdote from my life. At one point, I was in a youth group and we went to a convention. And at this convention, you have all kinds of personalities up on stage, work in the crowd, and we're hoping for a salvation experience or a strong, exciting boost in their spiritual walk with the Lord. And what happened at this convention is they got on a special speaker, as sometimes they do, who was specifically there just to get a tithe or to get the crowd to give. And this was specifically a youth conference, so the majority of people there were teens. And what happened is he ended up getting very specific, which I'm going to talk about a little later. And he wanted, I think, every student, or maybe it was every youth group, I'm pretty sure it was every student, to give no less than $20. And we came with a particular group, family, who had been worked over in that way years in the past, where much of their giving was lost, whether like the savings, that type of thing, were lost in the giving. And it ended up being not for the reasons that it was stated. It was a traumatic, even abusive situation. And what I saw there was some friends of mine and acquaintances that I didn't see as very emotional people at all at that moment were breaking down, crying in a corner, needing to be consoled because it was triggering for them, as how persistent this particular speaker was on getting a monetary amount from students. And they felt that they were getting worked. And I say all that because I understand how personal giving and tithing is. So the purpose of this video is to tell you exactly what we're going to do and how when we say we're going to encourage students to tithe and teach on it. And also want to say that this is kind of a kickback to you parents, challenging you to have this conversation with your student, because you, the parent, are the one who's responsible for making sure that they walk in this life and are not vulnerable to being taken advantage of by charlatans or just people who aren't good stewards, churches or organizations that aren't good stewards of their money, even if they have someone who can work a crowd and get a lot of money out of them. I wanted to say that to all the parents listening. So first, I want to talk a little bit about tithing and giving. So I'm going to read here out of Hebrews chapter 8, starting at verse 6. But as it is, Christ has obtained a ministry that is as much more excellent than the old, as the covenant he mediates is better, since it is enacted on better promises. For if that first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion to look for a second. If you look down at verse 10, for this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, declares the Lord, I will put my laws into their minds and write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. First, tithing under the Mosaic law, that's exactly the only place it existed. Is tithing was part of upholding the temple and also kind of everything in general. Theologians and scholars think that it was probably closer to 20 some odd percent, which probably not coincidentally is about what your students will figure out once they get their first jobs and get their federal and state withholding and Social Security taxes taken out. It's around 25% or something like that for most kids. This is not what we are under now. We're not under the Mosaic law. We're under a new covenant where the truth of God is written on our hearts as Christians. And it's superior, actually, is what the Bible teaches. And so being not under the law of tithing, we still use the term tithing in a commonplace sense to denote giving. And this is what we're going to be teaching the students. What does it mean under the new covenant, not the Mosaic, but this new covenant? What does it mean to give? And that's what I want to go into. So this is not an exhaustive teaching on tithing, but I'm going to give you an example of some of the teachings that we will give. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9, and starting at verse 6, Paul gives some principles. And principles are important because what we just read was that they were under a new covenant that's written on our hearts. And later on, or earlier on, I should say, in Hebrews, it talks about solid food being for the mature, those who through constant practice have been able to rightly discern between right and wrong. So there's this sense of we have a new law written on our hearts, and we use principles in constant practice to actually develop a sense of what it is that we are supposed to do. It isn't like the Mosaic law where you have some specifics of 10%, 20%, or whatever. And so here are some principles in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. So that's a pretty thick passage. There's several different principles we can extract from there. One, the more you sow, the more you reap, in principle. Obviously, there's different situations, and there's stewardship that we have to take into consideration. Also, you must not give reluctantly, and you shouldn't give under compulsion. So he's giving you two kind of extremes, whether you're reluctant or you feel forced. And he's encouraging you to develop some of these principles and get a sense of what you should do. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. There is also a sense that as you give, trust God, that he's going to make the work abound, that he's going to take care of you as you give. Those are all principles that we can supply. I'm going to continue reading because there's a couple more principles that we'll be teaching the students. Verse 10, he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of righteousness. You will be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. And there's another thing. It's tied as an expression of thanksgiving. When we give, it shows thankfulness. And here, verse 13, skipping down, by their approval of this service you're giving, they will glorify God because of your submission that comes from your confession of the gospel in Christ and the generosity of your contribution for them and for all others. There's also this sense of, as you're doing it and expressing thankfulness to God through your giving, it's encouraging other believers. And also, it's just something that pleases God. And people are encouraged by it because it's a mark of your obedience to God. So several principles there that we can go over. And especially towards the end, talking about it being an act of thanksgiving and an act of obedience. Those are all good things. But still, Paul, he stops short of putting any specific number down. This is something you work out with your student. And we'll be doing part of that and giving the opportunity, but the challenge is to you parents to sit down and discuss with them income and things like that and work in through these principles, maybe how much they should give or how much they feel led to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. All right, in this last part, I want to talk about giving specifically as it regards to the local church. So I'm taking a quick reading out of Philippians 4, and this is right after the famous passage where Paul talks about how I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. Verse 13, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And then in verse 14, right after, he says, yet it was kind of you to share my trouble. And you Philippians yourselves know that in the beginning of the gospel, when I left Macedonia, no church entered into partnership with me in giving and receiving, except you only. When he says in verse 14, yet it was kind of you to share my trouble, he's specifically talking, and he elucidates later, specifically talking about how as they support him financially, they are not only practically sharing in the trouble of his ministry, but they are spiritually profiting and gaining the same reward that he would get. So we will teach students that they are taking part in ministry when they give. And for that reason and others, we talk and emphasize the local church. You should probably give to your local church first. And yes, for the students that go to our youth group that don't go to our church, I will actually encourage them to give to their local church first, because it's part of partnering with the community, the Christian community that God has you at. And so for our church, we're very tied with Faith Christian School, and a lot of our service and efforts goes to Faith Christian School. And everyone, when they give to their local church, they should know where their money's going. It encourages you to actually be involved in the local church work. If someone gives money to our church, they're going to quickly find out how much of that effort, and yes, even monetary value, goes to Faith Christian School, just as an example. So, and I believe also when Jesus talks about, and when you give to the needy, and when you give to the poor, he actually expects us to be giving to the poor and needy. I don't necessarily think that's separate from the tithe or the modern day term of tithe. I don't think that's separate from our local church giving. I think we should know what our local churches do as far as giving and giving to the poor. So in our youth groups example, I will encourage students to give, and I'll bring up, for example, Leslie is this Compassion International child from El Salvador that we are going to put money towards. She is one of those examples. She, applied, went through the process she needed to get monies from a Christian organization. Our church has a partnership with that organization, and I'm going to teach the students that when they give money, it goes towards Leslie. We are actually taking part and profiting spiritually and practically from the work of Compassion International that our local church is partnering with. And so the same goes as I tell them to give to their local church if they don't go to our youth group. Find out where your monies are going. It's also part of stewardship, just knowing where your money goes and part of being involved in a local church body, which I really hope ends up serving all the local church bodies in the area. In closing, I just wanted to let you know that we are going to be teaching about tithing and giving opportunity for tithing, but also to let you know that these videos are here to benefit you in a timely manner of different things that we're doing that'll take a little longer or is a little more personal or heartfelt, and too much so to go on a text message. If you wanted to know exactly how youth group works or our different, how the service order, things like that, you are welcome to contact me personally or come in and visit, sit in on a night. One thing that's big important to us at youth group here is prayer. So I encourage you to send some prayer requests along with your students at night. And here in the month of October, we're probably going to have a little bit of a bonfire event and also maybe a prayer service event on our Wednesday nights, some prayer and worship. So that's just a little bit of what's coming here in October, and also this teaching on tithing that I'm excited about. And I encourage and challenge you to have those conversations with your students and look into the text involved.